one of my favorite strategies would be labeled disaggregation,
right,
which is the grunt work of getting down to more detail than your competitor normally will pursue in order to better understand the situation and what needs to be different in the future in order to realize the brand consistency and value.
So just staying on the theme of promise consistently kept, I have to go again back to probably the first time that I came across you but never met you, is in the coffee business. And I know you've got a fascinating story about consistently kept and a promise in the Nabob story. So I thought maybe you could share that with us.
Surely. Our shareholders, led by a young man of 32, who was second generation, insisted that we do a zero-based analysis. And this was the first time I really got any experience of that. And starting at the ground, sort of macro, we've got 600 employees and 5 or 6 significant categories of product that we're making for a captive retailer. We started back at coffee, and the new parent had bought 2 of these machines, which David knows, called SIGVAC machine, which was a vacuum packing machine. And we were forced to the reality that you could run one shift with 7 people, if I remember right. So 3 shifts, 21 people, not 600. And maybe you could run for 5 or 6 days a week, but then you needed preventative maintenance, okay, and a small crew for preventative maintenance. So now you're at about 25. Yeah. What about the other 575 people? And gradually, as we did the zero-based analysis, it became very clear there was only one business that would make it in the long run, which was coffee. And all the others were detracting management's attention from the one thing that had a chance but wasn't getting a chance. So that led to a shareholder approval of a plan, which was to say, basically, we have to get everything out of there except coffee. We'll keep the tea business, which was very focused and relatively efficient, but everything else has to go.
So you're basically becoming a coffee company.
We were basically becoming a coffee company.
With no brand.
Private label and all that means.
Yeah.
Indeed, you're quite right. So once we'd made that choice, then the focus could shift to how do we make that brand successful. And it became clear that what we were doing was confusing the consumer. Our coffee lineup was the traditional paper bag roast coffee, which was Canada at the time. And Nabob was big in the West in paper bag coffee. Cans, which were 25% a pack more expensive because it was vacuum packed. And then something that General Foods had tried, a SIGVAC pack from Europe, but it hadn't worked. And our European shareholders had tried and failed as well. But we owned 2 machines. And the consumer would look at these hard vacuum packs and think that the coffee inside was stale. The paper bag was the bag of choice. And the vacuum pack was for very few because it was 25 cents a unit more expensive.
And today it's the standard. You go and buy, and it's either in a can or it's in a brick pack.
It's in it, well, and they found technologies allowed them to to move it beyond just being a hard
Yep.
brick pack. But hard at the time was synonymous with being stale. So we're getting our way out of confusion, and we got rid of the paper bag and said intellectually, our shareholder believes in top quality. We'll only give consumers top quality. Vacuum cans, yes, they have a role, but it's selective and premium. And paper bags have no role, gone. Here we are with a hard vacuum pack. How do we persuade consumers that that should be the package of choice? In the middle of all of this, we had a cost structure that didn't work. Years of a retailer accepting union contracts that made no sense in the manufacturing world. An example would be that these very large employees group worked for 4 days a week and paid premium rates for doing that and amazing benefits. And we said to them, these other products aren't going to make it, we have to discuss. If we can't change that, we see ourselves being over here, which has a very different employee scale. At the end of failed negotiations, it led to a strike, which was met by a decision that my management team made, which was the strike would be matched with a lockout. If you want to strike and not work this out, we have no choice but to also lock you out indefinitely. The Germans were horrified. This is normally the practice in Europe would be you're all in strike, and until it's negotiated, that's it.
Yeah.
But the non-organized employees knew what was at risk. We were faced with restructuring, we were bankrupt, and we had to be for a better outcome. And so they agreed to join the leadership group in working coffee and tea through the strike lockout. So none of us were particularly good at doing that. We had to learn the hard way. And the Germans were amazed. They'd never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
And this was a key ingredient to withstanding the strike and holding the lockout for 5 months.
Wow.
It gave them confidence that management was all in. We ended up finding a bilaterally, conceptually acceptable outcome, but the outcome led to we're a coffee company with a little bit of tea. And that allowed us then to pursue the agenda for making a private label brand profitable, which meant it could then afford to become a brand. At that point, we're standing on one leg, a hard vacuum pack in Western Canada, a third of Canada, and we at least had money. So the agenda became, we've got to stand, if we're only on one leg, we've got to be a much bigger leg than that. And that led to building share in the West and expanding into the vital Ontario market. That was the genesis of moving from private label to brand.
Oh boy. Because I think back when on my first day at General Foods, I was told that Nabob was handing us our lunch. We were losing distribution. We were losing share. You had convinced at that point the consumer to try the brick pack. You may just tell people about Mike Reynolds.
Well, thank you. In the early days, knowing that we wanted to become a brand in all that that meant, and had no choice but to achieve that, because everything else was gone.
That's your one leg.
And the clock was running. There's a limit to shareholder patience. We engaged an advertising agency called Scali, McCabe, Sloves. They were hungry and in need of success, as were we, mutually with a shared objective. The first generation of advertising was milk toast, but getting us used to it. and we had the hard decision to write off the production costs. We didn't have a lot of money, but we wrote them off, saying not good enough. Went to the second generation, better, learned a lot, not good enough, write them off. Third generation was what Mike Reynolds became the spokesperson for, and we found a way to develop a commercial which extolled and explained the virtues of the hard pack, that it's not stale, it's actually fresh as can be. And it's personified by the expression Snip, Whoosh, Aroma. And that became the hallmark of what it was. It's not stale. And to demonstrate the point, he would open the commercial, as you know, using the hard pack. This pack is hard, and there's a reason for it. And he would then smash the other paper bags.
Which happened to be
if it happened
my
to be
brand.
Yours, and one I knew of from Standard Brands days, to demonstrate that they were stale. From the minute they were sold, they were stale. And then we'd get to the Snip, Whoosh, Aroma, and that became the imprimatur of the brand for years to come, always with Mike Reynolds doing that.
So a very simple, product-driven benefit,
Yes.
effectively communicated, changed the market dynamic, the consumer behavior, to the detriment of Jason Sanborn, who would have been the other major player back then, along with ourselves.
Yes.
And it became the leader. So again, consistently kept, though. You didn't waver up. The one leg just got stronger, is what I'm sensing.
It did. We had no choice, but
Exactly.
we had to know where we wanted to go.
Exactly.
There was a company coming up from Seattle called 𝗬𝗍𝗃, G-A-I-S, of Seattle. And I was lucky enough to persuade the CEO to say, I'm new to the business, help me, what should I know? If you aren't keeping a daily P&L, you'll never know where it went wrong.
Daily.
And I'd never
Which back then meant it was all manual, too.
Never heard of that concept
Whoa.
prior to that, a daily P&L.